This is for quality instruction, observation, supervision. As you move toward your next assignment, which is follow-up 3, you'll be working on a qualitative observation. Keep in mind that qualitative observation will be a more holistic approach. Just to review, as you go through supervision, as we discussed earlier in the course, there is a certain knowledge that the supervisor must have. There are certain interpersonal skills that must be exhibited, and then there is a certain technical aspect to observing. The outcome for this observation process and for this paper is to use quantitative instruments in order to provide feedback to teachers. Generally, most of you are probably using the Danielson framework, although if you look at the resources available on Canvas, you will also see there's information for Marzano. So how do you determine if a lesson has been effective? I'm not going to fill this in here, but really what you're going to think about is what the Danielson framework has. Domain 2 talks specifically about the rapport that a teacher must have with the students, and then in Domain 3 are the questioning and the formative assessment component. Largely, the lesson should be determined by the formative assessment and ongoing assessment, looking at mastery toward the lesson objective to determine if that lesson has in fact been effective. Just want you to take a minute to think about this quote. Keep that in mind as you focus on the qualitative observation process. So how do we define observation? You've already completed a quantitative observation in which you did a numerical counting of process and different steps. Again, this is the same idea. You're going to be looking at what you observe in the classroom, watching the teacher and the students, and then you're going to draw conclusions and put an evaluative component on what it is that's taking place. So as you take notes on the behaviors you want to observe, you want to jot down information, and also keep in mind you can use quantitative information, number of students on task, the type of questions asked, the time that takes place in a lesson are all pieces that can be part of this holistic observation process. So this quote, the act of noting specific description of what is happening, and then you make your conclusion, is what you need to keep in mind for the observation process. The clinical supervision model is what you're actually following in both follow-up 2 and follow-up 3, and the components are listed here, and you can look up information in the Glickman text in, I think, chapter 13. So you're going to follow this model. You want to have a pre-observation conference first with the teacher, which takes place before you observe. Then you conduct your classroom observation, and in follow-up 3, you're going to be observing for the entire classroom time. You want to then analyze and interpret your findings, which is the next step. Then you conduct your post-observation conference, where you interact with the teacher, you share your feedback and information, and get input from the teacher and clarify additional comments on any topics that you may not be clear on, and then you reflect and review on the process as it unfolded. When you actually meet with the teacher, this gives you a set of questions that you want to consider for your pre-observation conference, and that generally should be held with an administrator or a department chair. It varies from school to school, sometimes at school level, and also from district to district. But ultimately, you want to look at the student learning and the curriculum and indicators. You want to ask the teacher how they plan to accomplish that objective and reach those indicators. You want to look at high-level questioning for rigor. You want to consider assessment in number 7, certainly a warm-up and homework and extension in number 8. You want to see a connection to today's lesson should fit with yesterday's lesson and tomorrow's lesson, and then you certainly want to focus on differentiation for students of varied abilities. Just loosely, a lesson plan sample should have these pieces. Certainly if there's something that you have that has more information or more detail, but the general components are here. Indicator, objective, materials. You have some type of warm-up. You want to note your transitions. The procedures explain what's going to take place. How are you going to formatively assess the lesson? What differentiation are you providing? Universal design information here. Homework assessment, and extension. If you want to develop a form for the pre-observation conference, there's pieces here that you can use, and there's also additional resources which can be found on Canvas. So again, in this form, you're looking at the indicator, Common Core State Standards, why is the knowledge important, some other pieces to consider, the connection, procedures, your reflection on differentiation, and then the activity should help prepare students for success on some of the assessments, whether it's PARCC, high school assessment for government. The MISA is an additional one that could be listed, which is the Integrated Science Assessment, SAT, Advanced Placement. So as you look at classroom observation, the question is qualitative or quantitative. We're going to focus this time on qualitative, which is the holistic approach, although there are some quantitative components. So you're going to record the events as they occur. You're probably using an open-ended narrative just to take your notes, and the focus questionnaire would likely be the Danielson framework that everybody is familiar with. You'll be making your descriptive statements as you take your notes, and then you're going to go back and make interpretive as you convert those into evaluative statements to show whether there is progress toward mastery of the objective or if there are concerns. You're also identifying strengths or commendations. You're looking at areas for improvement and or recommendations. This piece about data, although this is a qualitative, holistic observation, you still should continue to use your quantitative measures. 2 examples are here. In 30 minutes, we observed or counted 57 questions. In the 45 minutes, we observed or counted 12 praises, 9 students, 22 of whom were present in the class. Praise statements were approximately timed as listed in the table. So you definitely can use that. The reason you want to include your quantitative observation data because that makes it more objective as you discuss that with the teacher instead of it being personalized. Written feedback. You may do the written feedback. Generally, it's after the observation occurs. It allows more time for the write-up, and then allows the teacher to clarify any confusion. You would have the conference first. Sometimes, however, the teacher gets the write-up before the observation conference. Then the teacher is more active in the conversation because they've had time to read your analysis. They have some think time, and then topics can be outlined in advance. In the post-observation conference, here are some things to think about. What did the students learn? How do we know? Was it what the teacher intended? Was it meaningful? Then you want to critique the process. Were you able to identify strengths? What kind of support are you providing? How can you help the teacher to be more effective? What type of material needs to be shared? And was what you communicated clear, and was the process helpful? Keep in mind that the observation process is the direct assistance, one-on-one staff development. Cautions. You want to make sure that you follow the steps in order and you have a clear outline process. The should can be rather difficult for teachers, so a better word is to consider, unless it is something that they must do, which would be imperative, such as including an objective. You probably wouldn't say you should consider doing it or consider having it. You would say you must have it. But be careful with their word choice, as the language really does have an influence on the tone. Avoid things that are absolute, such as always and never. Keep in mind that when you're talking about the observation process, it really is we, because you're a team, and the I statements, you really want to make it about the students or the teacher. You don't want, again, you don't want this personalized. You want to keep it very objective in tone and nature. A successful observer, as you collect your information, be curious. Remember, you don't have all the pieces. Be patient. Wait to see things unfold. Explain your role and lower the anxiety and try to blend in, work with the students to kind of become part of the lesson, which makes it a little easier for the teacher. You want to think about what it is that you're observing. Definitely multitask as you observe and record the information. You're looking at the teacher, you're looking at the students, you're looking at the environment, you're trying to take as much in as possible, following your form, using the Danielson framework to collect the information, and then see the forest and the trees. Really try to keep in mind the big picture of what's taking place in the lesson. And I'll leave you with that last quote and the idea of the purpose of an observation.